my god, we are live. Hello everybody, hello chat, hello wonderful people in the audience. My name is Grandmaster Illia Nyzhnyk, and I am here with my Chess Legacies lecture series, where I present to you some of my favorite chess players from the past. And not a long time ago, I have written an article on some of my favorite Ukrainian chess players of the past, and I figured that this would be a great time to demonstrate those players and why I like them so much. So the four players I have chosen are Alexander Beliavsky, Vasyl Ivanchuk, Adrian Michalchyshin, and last but not the least, Oleg Romanishin. All of them are alive, all of them are still kicking. If any of you have followed the most recent Tata Steel event, you could enjoy Vasyl Ivanchuk's awesome performance, scoring clear second place. So he's still out there. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first game I have is that of Alexander Beliavsky's from a while back. I believe this game was played back in 1988 between Alexander Beliavsky and Boris Gelfand. Beliavsky is playing black. So let's get to it. I wouldn't say there was many noticeable things about this opening choice. It's just going to be the standard, very typical Queen's Gambit declined. And yet, things are going to go quote-unquote south pretty quickly as Boris Gelfand chooses a pretty normal but rather non-typical bishop development, as the bishop usually ends up on g5 in these positions, trying to apply maximum pressure against the f6 knight. In this game, Gelfand went for bishop to f4, and oftentimes the ideas might include trying to apply the pressure against the c7 pawn here with some knight b5 sometime soon, and ultimately white will try to keep the f4 bishop alive by playing h3 and hiding it on h2. When the bishop goes to g5, it is oftentimes traded thanks to some of the maneuvers that are available to black. So on f4 it's naturally safer, but obviously there are ways for black to combat this development. Beliavsky is unfazed. He goes ahead and castles. Gelfand responds with a simple e3. So nothing out of ordinary until Alexander Beliavsky goes ahead and plays this move c5, which, as we can see, is an immediate aggression against white's central d4 pawn. In a more typical timid Queen's Gambit lines, we would normally see stuff like b6, where black's bishop would end up on b7, then knight bd7, and then eventually black would end up playing c5, as it is one of the more common ways to get into a pawn symmetry. So the idea of playing c5 is that after all of these trades, all of the pawn trades, the pawn structure becomes symmetrical, which is naturally very safe for both sides. W Kearns, is this going to be a new weekly lecture? That is correct. Yes, it is a new lecture series. Every Tuesday we're going to be discussing, we're going to be looking at some of the games from amazing players of the past. So c5 happened. Playing c5 this early is a little bit unorthodox because it allows white to take on c5, posing a question. If black just goes ahead and takes back, white can take on d5, and this is not something black necessarily wants to get into, as black ends up with an isolated pawn on d5. The isolated pawn can be seen as both weakness and strengths. In the long run, the isolated pawn is going to be most definitely a weakness as this game gets into the endgame, because the pawn is separated, and in most endgames it's going to be a burden. So the strengths of the isolated pawn is usually easier central control. So now black has easier time controlling the e4 square because of this d5 pawn. and it's mostly used to play in an aggressive style, right? So as soon as the e4 square is occupied, black might even eventually go for a rook lift, and black will be looking forward to attacking white on the king side with this. Alternatively, black can try and play for the pawn trade, so play knight c6 followed by d4 is going to help black get rid of the isolated pawn, leading once again into a pawn symmetry. Right, so if white takes, black would take back, leading into symmetrical pawn structure. But this is not what Beliavsky went for, and that's kind of what struck me as a pleasant surprise, because over here Beliavsky, oh, he did play bishop c5. My apologies. He did play bishop takes c5, but then later, as his opponent didn't go for the c takes d5, yeah, this is where Beliavsky started going really, really aggressive. Goes knight c6, eyeballing the b4 square for the knight. White responds with a3, and now he goes ahead and plays queen to a5. So a very non-typical way of playing Queen's Gambit declined for black. Once again, I can't stress it enough. I have a long history of playing against Queen's Gambit declined as white, and more often than not, my opponents would just play the opening very, very safe. And because of how sturdy the resulting positions are for black, it would be big pain for me to try and win those games, and I would oftentimes end up overpressing and losing with white. So my overall score against Queen's Gambit declined with white pieces is negative because of it, because I would end up playing against solid pawn structures and would be unable to break through. But this is not how black is taking it. Black is immediately going into the offensive, forcing white to make a decision. Since the king is still in the center, white has to make a choice. If white tries to castle short, I'm afraid it's a bit too slow. Let's say bishop e2 runs into knight to e4. Now white is kind of in trouble because knight c3 is a big deal. Right? White cannot just ignore this. White's pawn structure in this case is pretty bad, so black is actually the one holding an advantage in this case. All black has to do is make sure that they finish developing the queen side, and they'll have two easy targets. So that's definitely out of question. I think the alternative here is to, or the typical alternative is to play knight d2, but this alternative is mostly available for when e5 is not as good as it is here. Hello Fisher Random Chess. Who are chess fans? You guys in the chat, and a lot of people here in the live auditorium. Quite a few people here today. Welcome. So knight d2 is typically played to blockade the pin against the knight on c3. Also, this knight can then be transferred to b3. I'm pretty sure this move hasn't happened. Yeah, so Boris Gelfand just went ahead and castled long, which kind of demonstrates how Gelfand was hoping to, play for a win against Queen's Gambit. He was deliberately looking for ways to make the position more dynamic than it normally would be in typical Queen's Gambit structures. So goes ahead and long castles. Once again, knight d2 might be running into e5 and or d4, so I guess this is why Gelfand went ahead and castled long, just to make sure he doesn't have to worry about the king being so exposed on e1. Bishop d7. So bishop d7 is not just a simple developing move, as you guys can see indicated by the arrow. It is also the kind of move that frees up space for one of your rooks. I think it's probably going to be the f rook going to c8, as you're good. So f rook is more likely to be going to c8 because this is where white's king is. So we are very likely going to be keeping the AA rook on the same side, so it can be used for attack later on. So yeah, this is where the game gets kind of crazy, right? In cases like these, where you have opposite side castling, you are pretty much fully invested into completely trying to run your opponent over as fast as possible. Because if not you, if you're not gonna do it, then your opponent's gonna do it to you. So White, without any further ado, just goes ahead and presses with G4. Pretty sure taking is just like signing your death certificate in this case, because opening up the G file doesn't look very good. Plus, we're probably losing some material on top of it. Not only are we getting hit really hard, but we're also probably just losing the extra pawn back immediately, and then more. So I don't think this was an option at all. Yeah, Fus Chess. Yeah, so Fus Chess in the chat says that Black can afford some aggression because of the way White plays their bishop. Yeah, once again, there's some tempo moves available to Black with E5, and that's what makes their attack a bit more manageable to execute, right? So G4 happened. Beliavsky ignores the pawn, goes ahead, plays Rook Fc8, and now Gelfand responds with King B1. So this is a critical moment of the game. May not seem like it, but we need to, as Black, we need to decide what to do next. It doesn't seem like we can make any immediate progress on the queen side, but there is one thing. By the way, this move that Beliavsky played in this position, this move is oftentimes recommended by the engine against most of White's aggressive lines. I know this because I actually have worked on some of these lines from White's side, where White quickly castles long, and the engine almost always exclusively says that against somebody who castles long, we don't care about the material anymore. We are going to try and just expose the queen side as much as possible. So kind of doing what White did. White tried with G4, however, B5 is a lot more effective, because B5 leaves White no choice but to react. We can ignore the G4, but White cannot ignore the B5. Fisher Random Chess was asking about bishop takes A3, but this might not be, without access to the B file, which is exactly what Beliavsky was doing with B5, this sacrifice might be a tiny bit too slow. So I guess just queen B2 would force our queen back. We never want to trade, we just give up a piece. But I guess, sorry, my apologies, if queen A5, we might be running into a time trouble, yeah? Not as in like literal time trouble, but as in a problem where we don't have enough time to get our pieces out, and White will just defend themselves, maybe with moves like knight E5 or maybe even G5 and just simply take on D5 should be good enough for White. So I think bishop takes A3 would be a little bit too premature, but it is definitely an option, which will be very, very important later on. So Beliavsky goes ahead and plays B5, leaving White no choice but to take. Taking back with the knight, I guess just runs into, okay, so this is basically, this is it. This would be it. I'm pretty sure that now we are completely justified in taking on A3, because now the B file is completely exposed, and our next move is Rook B8. We might just be winning here. What if B5 after bishop takes A3? Also over here, let's take a look. Once again, bishop A3 takes, and B5 right now. Okay. Now this is very interesting. I mean, you could be correct. This is oh, hello Kenneth, nice to see you here. This position is very complex. I don't really wanna resort to the engine's help, but I think that there is a high chance that even this approach would work. It just makes a lot of sense to me, right? What you're doing makes a lot of sense, and even though we're giving up a piece, we definitely have a lot of compensation here going on the queen side. So I wanna take a look at what the engine believes this is, and actually engine likes it. Look at that. I like complex. Yeah, look, the engine does say that if White defends correctly, White will have a small advantage, small edge after c takes b5, But to me, as a player, as a practical player, this is not obvious at all. Like, I don't want to take on b5, to be honest with you. So this is definitely a possibility. Engine gives plus 0.4 to white. I'm not sure if you can see it, but this is, you know, it's anyone's game. There's knight e7, next move is knight e4, if pieces are flying, right? The thing is, so here's the thing. The reason why I like playing b5 early is because to me it seems that taking on a3 is something that's available to us pretty much at any time, but playing b5 might lose its charm the longer we wait, okay? This is why I like making the moves that we know we need anyway. Right? Bishop takes a3, and even after bishop takes a3 we go b5. It means that we've needed b5 in the first place, so why not just do it, yeah? So b5, c takes b5, knight e7. This move feels a little bit too slow, a bit too sluggish for how dynamic this position has become, but trust me, this actually makes sense along the way. So Gelfand feels like he's, you know, there's something is seriously wrong with this. He goes ahead and tries to bring in more defenders towards his queen side, but this is kind of where we can already see who is the one controlling the game flow. It's clearly Beliavsky, even though he's playing black, but suddenly his opponent is forced to pull his pieces back and try to defend himself. And that's, you know, it's amazing how quickly the tides have turned, that black is the one controlling what's going on. Goes ahead and plays queen d8, which is once again another shocking move to me, because why would we ever move the queen away from the side of the board where it belongs? But once again, there's a big reasoning behind this. We don't want to run into knight b3. We don't want to allow knight b3 to be a tempo move. And actually now, if white tries knight to b3, I'm pretty sure we have some tactical trick to get a big advantage. Can somebody tell me what it is? It's you know, it's the kind of move we've just discovered, but now it's even stronger. Bishop takes b5. There is bishop takes b5. I'm afraid that's not gonna be good, but it's coming. We need to do something else first. I'm sure bishop takes b5 will come in handy. Bishop takes a3. Yeah, correct. Because now it actually is this knight is the one that's been pretty loose. So knight e4 is coming in. If white defends with rook d3, now this is where bishop b5 will be a lot stronger. White can still defend with bishop e5, but now we go knight g6. You see knight on e7. Knight went back to e7, but now it's jumping out from the other side. Bishop d4, e5, and I'm sure that this is pretty much as bad as it gets. Everything is collapsing. White's extra pieces are going to vanish within the next couple of moves, and you know the queen side is completely exposed. So this feels like it's going to be over sometime soon. So yeah, knight b3 did not occur, I believe. Oh, it did. Oh wait, it did occur. Wait a second. Wait, knight b3. What are we missing? Wait. What are we missing? Bishop takes a3. What is the miss? This feels forced. Yeah, bishop takes a3, b takes a3 feels like it's all forced, because if white ignores this, then we're just going to retreat to b4, we're just going to take on c3, and it's still, you know, we're still attacking. So there must be something that I'm missing. Is this the line that I thought is really good for black? Is this line a problem? Okay. People in the Twitch chat are saying that yes, it's probably this line that's a problem, but not quite sure why. My tactical vision has been subpar at best these days, so I'm not surprised I'm not seeing the obvious. Maybe it's just something simple like queen to b2, moving the queen away from the pin, and let's say, aha, yeah, takes here, takes, and then anything taking on d4 should just do. Oh, well, is it anything, or is it a specific piece? Because g4 is hanging. Oh, Raiders alert. Hello, Raiders. Welcome. We are discussing games of some of my favorite Ukrainian chess players of the past. This game is between Boris Gelfand and Alexander Beliavsky, where Beliavsky has pretty much crushed Gelfand in in a sharp aggressive style. But just to confirm my suspicions, is this the one? Yeah, looks like, but I mean this position is still very unclear. The engine says it's zeros after queen to e8, which once again I would never have guessed. Actually no, I could have guessed this because I know how engines work these days. Everything is a draw in engines' mind, even positions as crazy as this one. But in my mind, the game goes on. Was there anything better from any of the sides? No, this works, right? 1 sec. What? There must be takes here. Bishop e5. Wait, bishop e5. Knight g6. Is something over here. Oh my God. Okay. Magic 0, 0, 0. No. It's not zeros, unfortunately, because once again, Ilya is blind to simple tactics. Yeah. No bueno. Just down a piece, and it looks like we don't have enough compensation, and yet it's still like plus 0.8, meaning that despite the fact that white is up a piece right now, it's still pretty much unclear. We can give up the knight over here and then keep hitting white on the queen side. But why? Since Alexander Beliavsky from 1988 is still better than Ilya from 2026. Alexander sees that taking on his a3 immediately is not good enough and goes knight e4 first. Now what's up with this? Knight takes c5. Yeah, so it's understandable that white would be thrilled to trade some of the pieces because they're being hit. Rook takes c5 and bishop to e5. Feels to me like white has defended. Yeah, let's take a look. Knight takes c3, bishop takes c3, bishop takes b5. So Beliavsky just takes his small wins where he can get them. Yeah, not really up any material, but he maintains the control over the two most important open files, the C file and the B file, because that's where the main action is going to happen. So I guess in his mind, this was enough of an advantage to justify a bunch of light piece trades. Bishop takes, rook takes, and now Gelfand claims that, oh well, I've traded so much, you are very likely to run out of pieces if you still try to attack my queen side. So let's take a look. It feels like Alex Beliavsky is accepting the challenge, and he is unfazed. Goes rook c8, creating an additional pin just for good measure. Gelfand goes h5, and queen d6 comes through with an obvious but a pretty simple threat. Queen takes a3. So I'm fully expecting Gelfand to move the king out of the way, and that doesn't happen. Goes queen a4. So I wonder what's wrong with, let's say, king to a2. What do we think? What happens if the king moves out of the way? This would be something, this would be like a kind of move I would look at first, because I really don't want to deal with my king being pinned on the b file. But somehow this wasn't good enough. I refuse to believe that Gelfand would make a mistake of not playing king a2 when he had the chance. There must be something off with this.
Is that how he played, or he didn't?
He didn't play this, right? But this would be my first. This would be the move I look at. This would be the first move I look at, because once again, I don't want my king to be anywhere near these two squares, as that would put it in X-ray of black rooks.
It looks like a solid move to me.
Right? Yeah, it looks pretty solid, and yet it wasn't played, and I'm not sure if it was ever played, to be honest with you. So I'm wondering why. No, it was played. It was played just a few moves later. Maybe it's because he was afraid that the knight is going to come into b4. That's a possibility. So maybe after queen a6 followed by knight c6, knight b4 will become a big threat. Fisher Random Chess says that maybe there is this e5 and d4 idea. Oh, this is tricky. This actually is a pretty cool idea, because now as the king is on a2, if I ever have to get my queen out of the pin, I have the queen e6 check. So this is definitely interesting. Yeah, this might be it. Let me check. No, it's not e5. Actually, e5 is one of the better moves here. And apparently the position is still unclear, but yeah, apparently e5 is very, very interesting. White can respond with h6. Yeah, I don't think h6 would have ever been played because it feels like you shouldn't be ignoring the d4. Wait, what if white goes king a1? Yeah, king a1 seems to be the best. And then rook c5, king a2. Looks like white is actually doing quite solidly here. So I guess we were correct to to be confused why the king didn't move away from the attack, but I guess we're gonna see it firsthand why making sure that your king is safe is still of utmost importance, even when it feels like your opponent does not possess enough capability, right? Does not possess enough resources to punish you. Fus Chess is wondering if the king can go on a walk and go all the way over here. It feels unnecessary, as we've just seen. The king is actually perfectly safe on either a1 or a2. So, walking through some of the most dangerous places does not seem necessary in this case. So queen a4, I would say, is inaccuracy number 1, where Gelfand is greatly underestimating the attacking capabilities of Alexander Beliavsky here. And after queen b8, bishop e5, a simple move that seems to be winning a tempo, right? Black cannot take back as the rook is hanging, but at the same time the bishop is going to be hit by the knight. So now, after simple queen b7, black's threat is knight c6 with a tempo, and I don't really like bishop e5 because of it. As far as I know, this is where Gelfand makes critical mistake and loses the game, but once again, never feel too safe, right? Especially when you have, I mean, I understand why the mistake happened, because when you play as white, right, when you play with white pieces and you yourself deliberately make a choice of castling into the opposite side, you feel like you made the choice, so now you are invested into the attack, right? You're also invested into the attack against your opponent's king, and when you castle long and all of a sudden all you can do is defend, it creates a dissonance, right, in your mind that, oh well, I've made this choice, I have to do something, right? I have to attack because that's what I've decided, right? And then something goes wrong and you are unable to attack, and but you're still trying. The situation changed. We have to adapt. And in this case, Gelfand doesn't realize that he doesn't have time anymore to do whatever he is meant to do. He has to address the immediate issues on the queen side, move the king out of the way, play rook c1, trade some pieces, right? But he can't stop himself anymore. So g5, knight c6, as expected, knight gets pulled up. Now rook c1. Question for you guys: what happens if bishop moves back to c3? And this is, by the way, this is why white having the king on a1 would fix it. I'm pretty sure right now black has a great resource to utilize poor positioning of the white king. What is it?
Push the pawn.
Which one?
The one on d5.
Well, but then takes. We can do even trade. I'm not sure if this is very effective. I mean, this feels like we are turning the game into a positional battle more so than an attacking fight, right? Because now what we've done is we've locked in White's bishop behind the isolated d4 pawn. So now I think now our play is just going to be mostly positional, trying to occupy the outpost and d5. This is definitely a valid play style. I'm just not sure if this is going to be very effective. So somebody in the chat proposed rook a5, but we can just take, right? We don't have. This is a cool distracting maneuver, but we just take, and that's how it ends. I think knight a5 is probably it. There's knight a5, right? Using the fact that bishop can't really take the knight, we can transfer it to c4. Another idea I could think about was maybe just playing e5 d4. It might feel a bit too slow, but I think we're actually just going to make it on time. I'm still mostly thinking about knight a5, the knight left to c4. It should be very effective. So over here, Gelfand goes rook c1, which is a tactical maneuver to help him hold his position together. Knight takes e5 loses very quickly to simple rook c8 and queen b5.
Take rook on b2.
Over here?
Oh yeah, because of the bishop.
The bishop is there, yeah, the bishop defense. Can somebody tell me what is this tactical mode of code? What is black doing with this move?
Blocking.
It's blocking the defender or interfering with defense, yeah? So interfering with the bishop's defense for the b2 pawn. Now white has no choice but to take with the bishop, right? Otherwise they lose either b2 or e5. Why was it important for us to sacrifice this d pawn? What's the big deal?
To put pressure on the b2.
Well, yes, but it feels like we haven't really done anything, right? Because all we did was give up the d pawn, and nothing truly changed for us. White still has the bishop defending the b2. So why was it important? So this was me tricking you guys. d4 wasn't just interference. d4 was also a decoy. It's interfering with White's bishop's defense, but it also decoys White's bishop from doing something a lot more important than defending the b2. Well, not a lot more important, but arguably something as important as defending the b2. What was it? What else was the white bishop doing on e5? Okay, people in the chat got it. What about you guys?
What else was it doing?
Yeah, so the bishop was on e5. Yeah, it was on e5. It was defending the b2, but it also had another purpose.
b8.
Attacking the b8. So d4 was a decoy masterfully planted to distract the bishop so that black can simply triple up on the b file. No matter what white does, the b2 is falling now. White does not have a way to defend the b2 without bearing massive material losses. So for example, if they try to use the queen, we're going to take here, and we're going to take here, and the game ends instantly. If white tries to use the rook, basically the same, but now we have a pleasant choice because we can also pick up the rook on h1 at the same time. Everything else loses. If white tries b4, we can just go ahead and take on b4. We have amazing triple heavy piece formation on the b file. There is nothing white can do to stop us capturing the b2. So white decides to try for a final chance, goes for bishop c3, rook takes b2, king a1. So what now? we have done the thing we wanted the most. We have infiltrated White's side of the board. We have picked up one of White's most important pawns on b2. Now it's time to look for a finisher. Where is it? Can somebody tell me? Where is the finisher? What's the winning idea going to look like? Because as of right now, we are not really threatening anything, yeah? It's weird. It feels like, okay, it should be here somewhere, yeah? But somehow, some way, White has most things defended perfectly and we can't really break through. If we get baited, we could get baited. We could say that, oh, well, our position is so good that let's just go ahead and take a tasty looking pawn on f2. But now this is where we ourselves might get hit back, because we actually have some back rank issues, and we need to be very careful. Like already right here, let's say if you make a simple and proper looking move queen c7, we're lost, because just simply we cannot take back with a knight. Once again, back rank problems. If we take back with a queen c6, we lose. So picking up the hanging pawn in this case may seem correct at first, but in retrospect, it's actually a pretty bad idea. I think we're losing by force. I didn't show you guys a more effective way to win for White. So let's say if queen c8, basically claiming that, oh, if rook takes b8, we can take back with a knight and we are safe. But now White has a phenomenal tactic. Can somebody please show me what tactic I'm talking about? Once again, using the
Queen takes the knight.
Bravo. Queen takes the knight, removing the defender, using the fact that back rank is so weak. No matter what we do, we are going to be losing this game now. So, what does that mean? Where is this improvement? We need to improve something or someone. Who are we going to target? Which piece is arguably the most annoying defender that we have to deal with here? If not for that one piece, a win would be very trivial. Sorry?
Bishop.
The bishop. Yeah, the bishop. If the bishop is gone, if you imagine the bishop is gone, we have a very simple tactic to end the game, right? If the bishop is not on c3. So let's deal with it. Okay, Fisher Random Chess already sees it. Yes, okay, yeah. Well, okay, so Justin Conclusive from Twitch chat said the correct move, just gave the wrong notation. I get it now. So this is, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the move we're looking for. Actually, no, not even. Rook b6. As far as I know, Rook b3 also wins, but Rook b6 is a bit more direct. But Rook b3 is just as good. I don't think there is any defense against this now. And also a3 is getting hit at the same time. Or was it Rook b... whoever said Rook g3, did you mean Rook b3 or Rook b6 in the Twitch chat? Because, no, oh, I guess Rook b3, so there is Bishop b4, yeah, but this is still winning. There must be a way to still win this, as far as I know.
Well, in that position, you would play your knight.
Sorry? In
Position you would play with your knight, take the bishop.
take over here? Oh, but then we lose the rook. Is there a way? Wait a second.
What if you played on e5? Yeah.
Oh, well, we're still losing the rook.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe rook b3 is actually not as simple. I'm pretty sure that there's a way. Maybe just take on b4 or take on a3. There must be a way. Actually, no, there isn't. I'm just horrible with tactics. My apologies. It is rook b6. Okay, so rook b6 and the rook is coming to a6, hitting stuff on the a file. Big disappointment, Ilya. Hiya, can't see simple tactics. I played a small blitz match against some young player earlier, and he was destroying me. I barely managed to win a couple of games. I lost the first game, and then I'm like, wow, I asked him what.
Just want to explore one more combination. If you go back with rook
Okay.
on b3.
Okay, here.
Yeah, and then goes like that.
Mhm.
What if you take it with the rook
Mm-hmm.
and then takes?
Takes here.
Yes.
Well, game goes on, but we might not have a clear way to win anymore. Like, white has ways to delay us pretty much indefinitely.
I see.
And we might still be okay, but the engine. I quickly checked what the engine said here, and the engine said that black is worse now. It's not like losing kind of worse, but if we don't have an immediate win, it means that we've screwed up. So rook b6 gives us that immediate win. I guess there's no defense against rook a6. So Gelfand tried something, but rook a6 came in. And even though there was some rogue check on f4, it's still pretty hopeless. Queen d6, and knight d4 for style points. I'm pretty sure I shouldn't really be saying anything, I feel like, because I'm just blundering left and right. I think even knight e5 would work here. Any logical knight move should do it, because the queen is super overwhelmed. Wherever it goes, we have some more knight jumps, and the game just ends. Well, Gelfand resigned after knight d4. But all of my inept tactical vision aside, the reason why I like this game is because this is something I can relate to practically a lot, where your opponent just gets out of their comfort zone. Boris Gelfand was the one who made the decision to castle long early, right? So he got himself into the mindset that he castles up in opposite direction and he has to attack, right? Because that's kind of like the basic thing about opposite side castling, that oftentimes you're just going to go for an all-out attack against your opponent's king. And as soon as he realized that he can't do that, his game kind of collapsed, right? Because he felt like he failed, right? He failed, and whenever you feel like you fail playing with white pieces, it's really difficult to come back from it. And this is something I resonate so much with in my own games, as I myself have a couple of examples where my opponents would lose to me in a similar fashion, where they would expect something out of the opening, they didn't get it, and they fail to readjust, right? So what makes Grandmasters so good is their ability to adjust to all kinds of different or unpleasant scenarios. But even Grandmasters are susceptible to failing under these conditions, and that's how you beat Grandmasters. Everybody has their own style, their own logical chain that they follow during games, and this chain was broken for Gelfand in this game. This is why I liked Beliavsky's performance in this game so much, even though at some moments we could see that his attack was practically not necessarily crushing, but because his opponent was kind of out of it by now, it was very effective. Yeah, and that's oftentimes is all you need. You just need to take your opponent out of their comfort zone, and even if your play isn't perfect, you oftentimes get that point. This is game number one. I've spent way too long on this game. I just want to show you very quickly this game between Vasyl Ivanchuk and Sergey Karjakin from, I believe, back in 2010. So a fairly recent game. I think that's probably one of the most recent games in this file. This is just you guys will see it for yourselves. Vasyl Ivanchuk is playing with white. We have neither of defense, one of the most famous Sicilian defense variations. And Vasyl goes for the sideline that used to be very popular. This is actually something I would play myself against neither of players when I was younger. The idea is that bishop c4 prohibits the e5 lines. So in neither of these days, people would play something like bishop e3 or f3, and against these two moves, even against bishop e2, black's natural response is to play e5 and kick the annoying knight out of d4. Pardon me. But against bishop c4, that doesn't happen. And the reason for that is because if you try to play e5 right now, you will completely lose control over the d5 outpost. White has a couple of simple moves where they're gonna get full control over the d5. And this is something that black needs to avoid at all costs possible, because if white is the one controlling d5, black's pieces are gonna start suffocating. One of black's main ideas to untangle is to play d5 himself, which is completely impossible now, as white has their bishop on c4. So this is why e6 is in order, taking care of the d5 long term. White's bishop ends up on b3, and now we have a series of very common moves. Bishop g5 followed by queen f3 with a simple trap, keeping black's development in bay. Queen c7, luckily we have some tactical ways to develop, like so, for example. So e5 actually did happen. It's been such a long time since I've seen this line that I completely forgot that this is a viable way of playing. And after this trade, queen e3 comes through. As you can see already, black is somewhat struggling with development, because now if black wants to castle short, they will have to. By the way, as far as I know, this is still like one of the best moves, even though black has just exposed their king side. Feels like borderline losing for black, but somehow it's going to be okay. I guess because white's bishop is not where it needs to be. If the bishop was on d3 at this moment, then sure, the game would be over in no time, but white does not have a way to pull the pieces towards the king side quickly enough. So Karjakin plays bishop c5, and Ivanchuk responds with long castle. Knight c6, and this is where one of the most amazing positional sacrifices happened. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen this game before, but it's just very cool. Queen takes e6. This is just a pure positional sacrifice. White isn't even going to get a lot of their material back. White is just going to get an open center. White sacrifices the queen to expose black king, who gets stuck in the center. Not knight e6, aha, competitive muffin driver. Nope. Knight takes e6, runs into bishop e3 check, as we have just castled long. So no, it's not knight e6, it's queen e6. And Virich is going to be playing down the queen, but that's okay. Well, picking up the pawn on g7 on the way, going back to e6 with a check, and now we're just going to make a normal looking move, rook h e1. So at this point, white has 3 pawns for the queen. So if black decides, is this what black? Yeah, black did take on e1. I think there was a better move as far as I remember. Let me double check. Yeah, bishop takes f2 apparently was better, and this is the only way for black to survive now. As after rook e5, knight e5, knight d8, this is basically this is the forced line. White needs to try and go for some material, because they've lost one of the main attackers, right? They lost their e1 rook, so they have to try and win some of their material back. So this is the way they do it. And here, This would be a pretty equal game as white has a piece and 2 pawns for the rook, right, which is full compensation. Black's king is still somewhat uncomfortable on g7. White has some knight jumps. Black has to deal with still, so it would be an interesting game, but ultimately I think it's, you know, dynamic equality. Let's call it. Let's leave it at that. But Black here went ahead and took on e1, which led to pretty much an instant loss. So knight takes c5 comes in, which knight takes c5 is a very cool intermezzo. Yeah, we are taking with a check because, you know, white take on e1 immediately if we can sneak in another piece right before, and then knight takes b7. So the difference here is obvious. White has a piece and 3 pawns now for the rook, aka giving white a slight material edge, but also everything else is kind of working out in white's favor. You know, white's pawn structure is good. Black's king is still, you know, exposed in g5, and while it's unlikely that the king is going to get mated at this stage of the game, still, you know, there's some things that Black has to be watching out for. You know, some knight jumps, some forks, and etc. So knight d6, rook f8, and Ivanchuk starts playing this position. He goes ahead and plays f3, knight e4, rook takes e4, and now we are basically entering the endgame that is, you know, really, really good for white, with amazing winning chances, not only just because of extra material, but also because it's harder for Black to keep balance. A lot of things can go wrong. You know, a lot of pawns are hanging, pieces are, you know, not where they're supposed to be, and I think Ivanchuk just shows a great technique from this point onwards. So goes rook g4, knight e4, king e5. Most of the time you want all of your pieces centralized in endgame. So for example, right here, there's 2 things white need to be doing. Ideally, the king needs to end up on e3 or somewhere close to the center. And another thing is, I think white is going to benefit from not trading a rook for as long as possible. So over here, because rook g8, like if we start with king d2, rook g8 is going to force us to trade the rook. The reason for why we don't want to do this is because if we don't have this rook, we might not be able to defend our pawns when they get hit. So for example, the g2 pawn is getting hit. We have to play g3. If we go knight g3, our knight is stuck now. Right now, our knight cannot move, and that's not good. So we would have to play g3. Let's say rook f8. Now this pawn is getting hit. King e3, rook c8. Now this pawn is getting hit. You see the problem, right? We're essentially running out of pieces to help our pawns get defended. So it's actually in white's best interest to keep that rook alive for as long as possible until, or at least until, the pawn structure becomes a bit easier to handle. What do I mean by easier? If our king is on e3 at this moment and queenside pawns don't exist, it is easy to hold, right? Because the king and knight are on the same side of the board as all the rest of the pawns. That will be easy. At that point, I'm pretty sure trading the rook is okay. So let's see if Vasyl can get there. Karjakin goes for a4. It's pretty obvious that Black cannot wait. Black has to be annoying, right? Because once again, Black has issues, and the way for Black to survive this is to apply pressure using both of their rooks. So a4 takes, knight c5, hitting this rook. I guess rook a1 check is forced. Yeah, king d2. Now, the rook is probably going to end up behind the g-pawns here. Well, at some point. The rook g8 comes through, g3, rook f1. Okay, so the rook goes behind the f-pawn, but I'm afraid it's probably to no use. Yeah, king e2. Speaking of king in the center, seemingly, you know, great, but unfortunately in this case, it's really hindering Black's ability to create counterplay, as rook c1 fails to a simple knight to d3. So Karjakin plays rook b1, yet another pawn falls, and white knight once again assumes defending position in the very center after knight e4. I think the h2 pawn is not going to be a problem for white, right? Because rook h1 is just h4, And this knight is really doing a great job holding White's position together. So, well, h4 actually came in anyway. Speaking of keeping the pawns well protected, so h4, rook h1, rook c4, b4. Now, no need to be defensive anymore. Everything has been held as it's supposed to. So Vasyl launches a pawn march. Also, take a look at the technique, right? So he could have definitely played c4, but c4 runs into another issue where the king is getting cut off, right? So instead of not even, he isn't even playing king e3. He's just saying that, okay, I'm going to play c3 first, and I will play king e3 with all the benefits, right? Now I'm not going to be checked. If he gets checked on h2, king e3, and now the king is basically invulnerable. If he gets checked here, which is what happened, the king runs off to f4, and black is once again out of checks. Tries for some play against the f3 pawn, but with a little bit of precision, yet another pawn falls. And at this point, I'm pretty sure White would be winning even if these two pawns didn't exist. But why lose them if we can just hold everything together? So after rook d8, knight f5, the game ended. But once again, the really impressive part about this game is truly the positional sacrifice that happened over here with queen to e6, right? Positional queen sacrifice. Well, not fully positional, I want to say, but it's a kind of sacrifice where you sacrifice your queen and you're not necessarily expecting much for it in return immediately. Rook e1. You will be eventually winning some pieces back, but it may seem like you're not going to be necessarily getting all of the material back. So that is why I really like this game, and I'm afraid. Sorry?
I think he just got lucky.
He got lucky? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that this was.
Big gambling.
No, I think this was his prep. I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this was his home prep. Yeah. It's just. It's amazing to see these things working out, and I think, queen sacrifices that have been prepped are really impressive to see, but even more so when you're not necessarily getting an immediate return after the sacrifice. You just kind of have to play without a queen, and here the reasoning behind this was that White's pieces are just all so good, so well placed, and the black king is so weak. Right, exactly. Yes, that we're just bettering our position so much that it doesn't matter that we're missing like 7 points of material. Even if an engine says that black is winning, well, the engine doesn't say black is winning. The engine says it's a draw after queen e6, which is, very impressive, isn't it? With best play, black can get a draw while being up a queen. So that's nice. All right. Anyway, I'm afraid I've taken a bit too long showing the first game and all of my imperfect tactical vision today. So my apologies. During the next lecture, I'll go over some of the games I missed today, and I hope everybody enjoyed these two games. And I'll see you guys next week.
Right,
so take care. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm International Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, and I'd like to tell you about S-Chess. Well, way back in the day, Capablanca, the world champion, thought that chess was a draw, that between two masters, every game would end in a draw, and he decided to come up with what he called Capablanca chess. He introduced two new pieces, a marshal and a chancellor. The marshal would be the combination of a rook and a knight, and the chancellor a bishop and a knight. And he proposed playing his new variant on a 10 by 10 board. which meant the armies are very far from one another. The University of Dublin proposed a 10 by 8 board, and he accepted their suggestion, but you don't see many 10 by 8 boards. Many years ago, I was in the kitchen of my friend Bruce Harper, and I was telling him about Capablanca chess. And we both simply love the 8 by 8 board. But how to introduce Capablanca's pieces to an 8 by 8 board? Should we move the pawns and put the 2 new pieces on the vacated squares? No. We came up with what we think was a very elegant solution. The idea was that whenever you develop a piece, you vacate a square and you can gate one of your pieces onto the vacated square or not, your choice. Now, for example, if we just make a few more moves, again, I made a vacated square, but we didn't put anything on it. After I castle, notice I give 2 squares, E1 or H1. I can put the hawk on either the E1 square or the H1 square, and I can put the elephant either on the H1 or the E1 square. I choose to put the elephant on E1, my opponent castles, and he chooses to put the hawk on H8. One of the things that Bruce and I did is we decided we didn't like the names that Capablanca gave his pieces, Chancellor and Marshal, because what image comes into your mind when you think of a Chancellor or you think of a Marshal? For me, a Chancellor is like the Prime Minister of Germany with the big medallion. Marshal, for me, I have this image of a general. So we changed to a hawk, like a raptor, that has the powers of the bishop and knight, and we changed to an elephant, which has the powers of the rook and the knight. And we think this variation is extraordinary. I hope you like it too.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new class, Breaking Moves. Now, breaking moves, you might be wondering, well, what is that? Well, that means we've got news from the big chess world, and that is that Andy Woodward fought his way to the top of the field at the Tata Steel tournament. So he qualified from what is now called the Challengers, so-called B group in the past, but now it's called the Challengers, and he is going to face the top competition there, which is a special privilege because even though it was a strong field this time, but it could have been even stronger because there were a couple of people missing. The current #1 player who wasn't playing, that is Magnus Carlsen, and also, last but not least, Hikaru and Fabiano Caruana. Now, there's no guarantees that we're going to see all 3 of them play, but as you may have seen in some other sources and news, he was thinking of participating, and I would presume that we might actually just see either Carlsen or both him and Caruana playing the Tata Steel tournament, which will be quite a thing to see for Woodward Annie to even participate and play with those phenomenal players. Talking about phenomenal events coming up soon, we are going to have a special guest at the chess campus. In February 28th, we are going to have a book signing by Kyla Zhao. She is a Forbes 3030 writer. She is famous for writing novels, and she's going to sign her book, May the Best Player Win. And she's going to have a little bit of book talk with International Master Iran Shukandar. And you are also welcome to have some games and some free play. And if you wonder if there's any money you have to pay, nope, the event is free. So you are welcome to join, and it's gonna start 1 p.m. sharp. Now let's get into action. Let's see a bit of what happened. But before we start, I do want to bring up and respond to a comment that we've got from the previous time. The previous lecture, I did a little bit on the Fischer variation. So I'm going to put some of the moves out there. I'm going to start with that, and then we get into the nitty-gritty of Andy's journey. Knight c6, bishop b5, a6, and just a little bit of a teaser. Does any of you remember what is the Fischer favorite? Because here, this is well known to be Fischer's weapon. Meanwhile, I may have survived something, but that's okay. This is indeed live, if you're wondering. So there's actually two big main lines in this position. And Fischer's favorite line, obviously, is, drum roll, wait for it, Fischer favorite? Well, I'm actually curious if you know the move here, just inconclusive. Bishop takes c6. Now, I actually was given the comment that Fischer didn't play bishop takes c6 because Fischer loved a pair of bishops. Now, surprise, surprise, both statements can be true at the same time. In the comment, they said, well, they couldn't find a single game. Well, you have to start backtracking a little bit because Fischer played this against Portish, another top 10 player of the time, in 1966 and won a crucial game there. It went on like d takes c6, castles, f6, d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, c5, knight b3, and so on and so forth. He won a quite instructive game. We're not going to get into the details this time. And if you look even deeper, Fischer played this not just this time, multiple times with great success. Now, there was another comment relating to this one that, well, Sam Shankland says bishop a4 is better. Now, sure, you could claim that, and it is objectively favored by the computers, but, you know, there is something that bothered me when Sam Shankland was mentioned that he would never take on c6, and that's not the way to play for an advantage. So I actually take a deeper look And guess what I found? Bishop takes c6, d takes c6, castles, bishop g4, h3, h5, d3, queen f6, knight d2, knight e7, rook e1. And this has been played, surprise, surprise, by Sam Shankland against Ray Robson in 2023, which he won. So claiming that bishop takes c6 is completely toothless, well, you might have to ask Sam Shankland what he thinks by now, but he definitely did play this and won his game against Ray Robson. So you choose. It doesn't necessarily mean that it gives an advantage, but again, what opening gives an advantage? And if you have an answer, please comment in the YouTube section. We all want to know. We all want to know which lines win in chess and which doesn't. Now that doesn't mean that bishop a4 is not an alternative. It could possibly be somewhat of a better option, but who knows? There is no guarantee in life, and chess is part of life, at least for some. Now, apart from discussing this part, I do want to revert back to Andy Woodward's journey to the top of the A group. Now, this game is a tough one. You've heard of Vasyl Ivanchuk. If you haven't, well, this is your time. Vasyl Ivanchuk was a childhood prodigy, incredibly strong player who was really close to becoming a world champion and has been at the top for decades and decades. Really brutal matchup because Andy is facing the legend with the black pieces, even though Andy is considered the younger player. But we'll see if it actually matters here. So, Ivanchuk chooses d4, knight f6, c4, the classical way of playing a closed opening, e6, knight f3. Now, knight c3 is possible, in fact, been one of the favorites of the best player of all time, Garry Kasparov, played the queen c2 Nimzo. But this time, Ivanchuk chooses the more circumspect knight f3, by no means without venom, but it's a bit more solid. d5, and we are at the Rogozin variation. Now, I do want to ask y'all, what would you choose here to play as white? If you're not familiar with the opening, that's okay, because that actually happens more often than you'd like to imagine. You do want to try your hand at any position you get, because sometimes you'll have to figure it out on your own. Black wants knight e4. Well, knight e4 is an idea, but I would tell you that knight e4 isn't as successful of a move as you think it would be. They all win if you are not 3,400. Well, actually, it's not always the case, and most of the time it ends in a draw. What does that mean? Nothing particular. It just means if nobody's trying to unbalance the position, it often is an even game. But what if both sides want to win? So what would you guys do here as white? Now we get pinned, obviously, but it's not that terrible yet because our knight is not in immediate danger. But they might actually consider capturing that pawn. Before, white actually gets a couple options. This is actually the Vienna. White has the option of going e4 because you're not already pinned. And there's also queen a4 check. But after bishop b4, it kind of covers the idea of queen a4 check, because even if you do, that pawn is no longer covered. And that's a little bit of a hint, which I'm trying to figure out. What should you do, and what would you do here as white, this position? You could go g3, but then again, if you go g3, black may as well take the pawn.
E3?
You could go e3. In fact, it would kind of get into a different type of position and turn into a Rubinstein. E3 is one way. What else could we do? Hello, Holland Chess Club.
Queen A4?
Queen a4, but they will go knight c6. So you do want to focus on your issues and wonder what to do. What were you saying?
C5.
If you go c5, now c5 is of course a natural move, but here actually it goes against of what white is trying to do, because the reason white has some pressure is that you're undermining your opponent's center. So if you go c5, the whole purpose of your pawn actually just fades.
Bishop D2.
You could go bishop d2, just neutralizing the bishop. And as Fisher Random said, you can also take on d5. And in fact, that would be sort of a direct way of exploiting, of trading a pawn that's on the side for a center pawn. And that's actually why white would sort of claim an advantage, even if it's ever so tiny, that black managed to be forced to take on d5 like that. Now, the bishop does get better in that case. So here, Ivanchuk plays a demanding move and goes bishop g5. You might ask the most logical question. What would be your question to me?
Just take the pawn.
Yeah, why don't they take the pawn with black, right? And in fact, that is a direct transposition to the Vienna variation, d takes c4. So bear with me for a second. Black could also try to take here. Now your queen a4 check makes even more sense because you will capture the next move. So white can try to play it this way, or go e4, bishop b4. Now you can try to take the pawn, but then you lose this guy. Bishop g5, and this might be familiar to you from the previous example. You transposed into that position. Now, this is sort of an invitation for a tango by Ivanchuk saying, hey, if you want, we can get into the Vienna. Now, but black doesn't have to capture because they want to keep it more in the style of the Ragozin. It's possible, but not everyone's a fan, and they try to play it differently. So they go play h6, trying to undermine this. Takes, queen takes, e3. Now, sometimes people get dumbfounded about why do we trade the bishop? It always depends on the type of position you play. And the type of the position here is a closed one. Bishop is closed in, not many open files, if any. And in that case, you prefer the knights to bishops. Now, even though who prefer knights to bishops, as the position opens up, they become stronger. But for now, the knights are stronger. And that's why actually you should learn these basic premises of the game, because it can actually guide you in the right direction. Castles, rook c1. Now, again, I have this question for y'all. Rook c1, okay. Vasyl wants to go rook c1, but why not bishop d3? Why would he choose to go rook c1 instead of developing his bishop?
Try to save the tempo if you have to retake the pawn.
And that's exactly why he's going rook c1, trying to save that tempo. Because if they take, well, you're left with the rook there, and black actually had the gain, and we lost the tempo. And you might kind of realize that at the highest level, oftentimes reading the intention of your opponent is much more valuable than accomplishing your own goal. In this sense, chess is a bit like mental boxing. If you can outdo and kind of read their way, their movement, their play, you're going to do great. If you can't, you're going to make terrible mistakes or slight missteps. So rook c1, and guess what? Andy does decide to take on c4. And for all intents and purposes, Ivanchuk gains time. c5. And here, why does something that feels so wrong is actually quite brilliant? Now, don't expect big combinations yet, but this move, and I do invite you all to try to find it, is strategically genius. Or, in some other sense, paradoxical. Well, castling is a good move, but by in itself is nothing special. It would definitely be a normal move. D takes, and why would you take on c5? Well, as much of a guess, feel free to guess. You don't have to know the answer. So what makes you feel like taking on c5?
So if you take on c5, I just feel like, the key to it that you mentioned was it was paradoxical. So it doesn't really make sense to take on c5 because you just open up the position a lot more, especially for the queen. But I mean,
so it's true. I did hint it's paradoxical, but what would be the upside for you? What do you think?
well, right now it looks like, once you take, assuming the queen comes in, you can obviously take back. So there's that little exchange. But more importantly, you open up the queen file.
You open up the queen file, but you also open up for your rook, which is even more important. The bishops are only strong when the position actually is opened up. Technically, this bishop is still mummified there on c8, not doing quite a lot. So it's not quite powerful yet, and you kind of gain some momentum, or in chess term, an initiative, with you already being there to attack, while black is still kind of behind. For that reason, Andy doesn't take on c5. Also, this kind of runs into all kinds of shenanigans, which naturally Andy doesn't want to get into. So knight d7, and he's trying to take this pawn. Now, Ivanchuk is like, okay, I don't want you to have this proper structure. He willingly gives up the pawn, saying, you know what, if you want it, come and get it. But it comes at the price of these pawns being ruined and isolated. Castles, rook d8. Now, rook d8 is an okay move, but does it solve Black's issues? Not really. So I would even go as far as somewhat inaccurate. Ivanchuk goes and bravely offers a pawn. And now I want to ask y'all, would you dare take the b2 pawn, or would you choose otherwise? And believe it or not, these are like these core questions you have to ask when you're playing a game, especially if it's a rapid or a longer time control like this game was. You have to wonder if taking the infamous pawn is worth it this time or not. And by the way, it's actually a fair game to not know the answer, yet have the right intuition. You want to take it? Okay.
I wouldn't. I'd wait.
You don't want to take it?
Not yet.
Okay, so where would you put the lady if you don't want to take it?
Go back to
Here?
yeah.
Yeah, queen e7 is very reasonable. Yep. And, you know, just huddled together close to the family. He did take it. Queen takes b2. And, well, you can say Andy isn't brave. You got to be brave if you take pawns like that. It's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, by the way. In fact, in the Najdorf, a lot of the times, it is a pawn you can take. It's risky, still risky, but with perfect or pretty decent game and decent play, you can survive. White goes rook c2. The queen can only go to a3. Now, if you notice that your opponent can only move to a single square, that means you've got big compensation, maybe even more. And this is probably the big critical moment which Ivanchuk actually figures out. This next move is what makes or breaks the game. Here he finds a move, and after that, Black's position, believe it or not, is on the precipice. Now, whenever you're looking for tactics, what is the one thing you're looking for? Chat, what are we looking for when we're looking for a tactic? Combination of pieces? Well, always go back to the basics. Well, what are you going to capture at the end of the day? Sometimes you're looking for a weak king for sure. Undefended pieces. Exactly. Spot any undefended pieces here? There's a couple of them, actually. Undefended or insufficiently defended. That's correct. You see a pin. The rook is undefended. What else is undefended? The c6 pawn. Now there are also other pieces, but we can't get to it. You can't get to the king. It's too far. Can't get to the rook. It's too far. I mean the other rook in the corner. How can you exploit the fact that the rook is currently not guarded? Now, I'll give you an even better hint. Black most likely will want to move this bishop to b7 so the rooks communicate with each other. So how can you make a move that puts pressure and does not allow black to connect them? Yes, knight e5. And it's an incredibly strong move because the bishop can't move. I can immediately take the knight, so that's a no-go. You can't just take this because I take your rook. So black is in fact almost in Tsutsumang. You got a whole board of pieces, yet you can't move at all. So goes queen a4, which looks interesting enough, but no counter threats really. Bishop b3, and now the fact that we have all these type of threats show. Queen b5, knight takes c6, and this is very problematic because there's just so many threats. So Andy resorts to an idea, a trick. Ivanchuk takes on d8, bishop takes e4. And I believe that Andy may have saw this far, but here comes a beautiful, beautiful idea by Ivanchuk. Still keep in mind, it's not illegal to look for tricks and traps. And currently, white is up material. White has a rook for a piece. So white is definitely ahead. Knight takes f7. Very good. So it feels like it's going to be bad, or white that is, but after you take here, trying to gain more material, you take back with the bishop, and after it takes, check. And it all works out, and it really has to do with the fact that Andy just doesn't have coordination of his pieces. And then the rook in the corner is still hanging, and it's undefended. So he goes, takes it, doesn't take on f7, goes knight f6, and plays this very creative move of knight d8. And the problem is that you can't really keep this knight stuck there because I have knight e6. Because if you capture, I do pin you. And you lose the queen in the process. You may throw a couple of pieces into the fire, but that's not going to save you. And then the game practically ends. Vasyl make sure all of them are guarded, and white is winning. A5, check, and we're just gonna breeze through the rest. There's not much I can add to this one. White is up a pawn plus the position, and he does try to find some counterplay, but it just doesn't exist here. Rook d2, queen d7, you're up a piece. Try to exchange pieces. Queen e7 takes bishop g8, and Andy resigned because he's down material and is getting mated. So it's a tough game, and it kind of shows, and in fact, you'll see at the end Ivanchuk does do really well in this challenger event. But, as we already know, because I spoiled it, Andy did win the Challengers tournament. So here's a game that I wanted to show you, and it's going to be a sort of a comeback. Let's flip the board. So he's playing Faustino, and these matchups, if you want to win a big event that's in Tata Steel, even if it's the Challengers, you got to score a lot of points. Anyone's playing in the St. Louis Masters? St. Louis Masters, as it's coming up in February, it's actually going to be the same time as the book signing by Kyla. It's a FIDE event. It's a FIDE qualifier. So most of the people there, the cream of chess is going to play there from all around the world. So you're actually going to see eclectic, all kinds of players from the top, and even those that you rarely see. So if you will be in town, you should check it out, because you can even see the games live. I don't think there will be even a ticketed event. So you can just walk up in and see the games played. Fabiano, I'm not sure about Fabiano, but you could see a lot of top players. From top 10 to top 50, they'll all show up. Obviously, you can't talk to the players. The players who have finished their games, you might get lucky and chit-chat afterwards, but don't attempt to talk to them. That's illegal. During the games. It's not illegal to talk to them after the games. Thank you. So, let's take a look at this game. And it's sort of a must-win for Andy. And it just shows it's tough. But let's see what happens. So he goes e4, e5, knight f3, bishop b5. This is, again, that we talked about earlier, and I referred to the comment. This time, he is not choosing the Fischer variation. He's choosing bishop a4. But, you know, chess is all about taste and style. There is no single solution. Sam Shanklin might believe that there's one solution, but that is his opinion, and we respect that. So knight f6, castles, bishop c5. This is what is called the Arkhangelsk variation, favored by players like Onyszczuk, who's been a multiple times US champion, and Beliavsky, who you may have heard before. So c3, b5, d6, and white actually is not playing the most critical way. Knight takes e5 is one of the critical ways of playing. a4, bishop b7, and this is again a sub-variation of a topical line. Most everybody and their grandma plays rook b8, so they move away from all these pressure. But bishop b7 is a secondary option. Who knows if it's completely bad or it's just not in favor at the moment. In fact, been played by Vishy Anand himself. So it's been played by good players already. So d3, and d3 is somewhat of a concession, and I would even argue it's somewhat unambitious. Safe, it's definitely safe, but probably d4 is the one that would question Black's setup. But d3 is solid nonetheless. h6, stopping all these bishop g5 shenanigans. Rook e1, castles, h3. Now, I do want to ask you, I'm going to ask you this question honestly. What do you think could be a downside of Black developing his bishop to b7? h3 is by no means weird. It's a completely normal move. It doesn't actually lose control of d5. In fact, once the knight moves, it might actually support it. So that's not the reason. It may seem like it, but it actually is useful for that respect.
Maybe it makes it harder to defend the king side.
Very good point. Indeed, it does make harder for Black to defend the king side. Which square specifically that is really not controlled now?
Is that f5?
That is correct. It is the f5 square. And in fact, Faustino could have tried to go there and try to control it. But instead, he goes for the traditional route. Now, there's nothing wrong with these knight d2 h3 moves, but they are not too dangerous. It's not quite threatening for Black. Knight f1, rook e8, over defending, just making healthy moves. So far, Andy isn't doing anything out of the ordinary. Knight g3, here comes d5. And you might be wondering, how could I tell who's doing better in this position? It's actually easy. Just look at these four squares. It's a 2-to-1 advantage for Black. Now, obviously, we're kind of on the surface level, but it actually has a lot to do with the game. Believe it or not, Black might be inching towards being a little bit better. So even though you might be claiming, well, whatever you're saying, I don't believe you, well, computers believe me. So you can actually kind of gauge if you have a good position, if you have a fair control of the center squares. Now, what we know from hypermodern chess, this bishop is equally important, as important in controlling key squares as this bishop controlling the d5 square. So these things do add up, but if you just want to figure out and have a simple way of understanding what's happening, just look at those squares and you can tell, wait, am I dominated? Is it a 2-to-0 advantage? Then you'll have to fight back. If it's a 2-to-1, it's not the end of the world, but it does mean that one side has a slight advantage or slight initiative. So bishop e3, and bishop e3 is some sense admitting to that, because White is aiming for trades. Trades usually mean you're trying to neutralize. But it does help Andy to go c7, c5 in one go. And to be honest with you, this rook on e3 is not ideally placed. Goes bishop c2, queen b6, rook e1. Now, credit where credit is due, he does understand if the rook stays here, black might actually consider d4 because it could come with a tempo and black could start rolling that pawn. So Faustino decides to actually remove it before that would happen. But there is also a downside to these moves, even though it is prophylactic. The problem with these moves is it does not improve your position. It doesn't make you and doesn't give you a template for a plan. You're kind of giving room for your opponent to say, it's your turn, you decide what you want. Rook d8, and notice that black actually is much more organized than white is. So black clearly has a tiny bit of an advantage at this point. Queen c1, completely natural, just moving it away. Bishop c8. Again, eyeing the f5 square and improving. AB, AB, queen e3, queen c7, knight e2, bishop e6, just everyone's trying to improve their positions. Knight h2, d4, c takes, queen d2. And you can, again, if you cut the board, I actually infiltrated into your zone. So if you're a fan of football or soccer, black is clearly ahead because he's got the extra space. And last but not least, well, I pinpointed the bishop, but I mostly wanted to pinpoint the fact that the knight can never return to c3. So you're actually restricting all those pieces. Meanwhile, yours are much better. Rook a8, rook c1, queen d6, knight f1. Okay, so it's one thing to be better, though, in a position, but it's a different thing to actually win a better position. So my question will be to y'all, how would you try to improve Andy's position? Well, chess often is about understanding of the direction of your play.
Maybe try to get the knights
Okay.
on better outposts.
All right, so you want to get them to a better spot. How would you do it?
Maybe knight h5,
Mm-hmm.
and then f4.
Yeah, you could definitely go knight h5, knight f4. I would guess Andy didn't do it because he didn't want to trade. And that's actually one of the things that you have to figure out sometimes, whether this knight is much more valuable than the other one, and I would think so. You could go for b4. And I think Chess Lover and GMP is correct. b4, b3. Why? Well, that would just wall up this honorary bishop on c2. And once that bishop has no real place to go to, black's advantage actually grows tremendously. Now, Andy first went for knight h4, and knight h4 might shock you, but Andy has an idea. King h1, g5. This actually is a typical plan with reversed colors, and it may not be perfect. Like if you're asking an engine, the engine might not prefer this way of playing. But playing a classical game is different than engine games. In fact, he's making sure white is not going to go for f4 breaks. So, and he's making 100% certain that white is not going to go for an attack and undermine the center. and it will work. But you sometimes do have to play ambitiously to win a chess game. Simple moves sometimes just don't suffice for victory. Bishop d1, b4, and here comes the pawn. Knight g1, and knight g1 I actually don't like by white. It tries to be cute with this maneuver of knight g1, knight f3, but even though it's a close position, you don't have endless time. You want to create something more direct. I'm not saying it's easy, but knight g1 does feel quite slow. b3, and now the bishop is stuck. Rook a5, knight d7, we trade the rooks, knight c5, and the other issue is the d3 pawn is the target now. Bishop d7, knight g6, rook c8, king g7. And someone mentioned Karpov. King g7 is this Karpovian move. I would go as far as to claim that, because yes, there's nothing really happening here yet, but eventually white may trade on c8 and it will be a check. So because white, has no threatening pieces near the knight, and he takes his sweet time to just hide it from those checks and is just getting ready to move forward. Rook a1, rook c6. Slowly but steadily, Andy is going to take over on the a file. And now, strategically, black's advantage is nearing to be minus plus, which usually means the advantage is not decisive yet. He's not winning, but is getting close. Queen d2, rook a6, queen c1. How should we follow it up? Rook a2, of course. And you could kind of sense the strength of Andy's position by the fact that taking is just losing. It's just losing immediately, because we would get a pass pawn, a protected one at that, and it's only a single move away from being promoted to a queen, after, of course, a little help from our friends with knight b3 and queen to a6. Of course, white doesn't want to do this, but it just shows how dominating black's position is currently. Rook b1, knight a4, knight d2, queen c5. Eliminate your opponent's best defender. Now, you might be wondering, wait, Denes, aren't we supposed to avoid trades when we're up ahead? That is true. If you have more space, you don't want to trade naturally, and most of the time. But in order to win a close position and something so boxed up, you will have to make some bits of concessions. Here, the key for us to win the game is to win the pawn. If we can't win the b2 pawn, we can't win the game. Therefore, it is much more valuable for Andy to trade the c1 queen, even though our queen is superior to theirs. And the more you look at all these classical games and classical examples, you see that even if you have a big advantage, you want to transform it into something more tangible, a pawn advantage, a clear target. You don't always win just by proxy of pushing your opponent off the board. And even though Faustino is on the verge of collapsing, it still holds somehow. And that actually talks to the strength of the Spanish variation. Even though black is ahead, white is still fighting. It's not over yet. Queen takes, king g2, bringing the king, as he should. It's an ending. Knight a4, bishop d1. Just in time, but not quite. So, what should we do here?
Rook takes the pawn.
You can take with the rook. Rook takes.
Knight takes.
Bishop takes.
Take on e3.
On d3.
Your d3, yeah.
Very good. And that is one way of playing it. You didn't take with the rook, but it's just as good. I don't see anything wrong with that. Knight c3. So that is sort of the temptation of just going for the beauty prize, and also fair warning for anyone who's looking for beauty prizes. It actually is out of fashion, sadly. It should make a comeback. But anytime you go for a beautiful move, there's a high chance it just fails, and it fails spectacularly. Now here, if you go knight c3, yes, you technically might get something, but you mostly just lose the b pawn, and then your pawns aren't as strong. If I weren't able to take the pawn, sure, you could try this. But here there's knight takes b3, and there's not much gain from this. You can go c2, but I'm up a piece, so I'll be happy to give up this terrible bishop. And white is actually up a pawn, then he should be down a pawn. So knight takes b2.
Knight c5. Knight c5 in the other position. Here.
You could go knight c5, but you came from there.
Point,
Yeah, so the problem is that this was the original position. Yeah, it's just a repeat, yes. So takes, knight takes d3, and it's very pleasant for Andy right now, because not only is he up a pawn, he's got a protected pass pawn, and black has way better pieces than white does. Look at that knight on g1 and b3. They're completely off sides. It's very difficult to defend positions like these. Rook f1, you also have to go back to defend that pawn. If you lose that one, it's over. You could go h5, h4, but Andy doesn't even bother. Rook b2, just misplacing the knight. Rook c2, and I like this. Again, methodical, just making sure there's no counterplay. Knight f3, knight c5, eyeing the second one on the dinner menu, the e4 pawn. And that's the thing with these pawn structures. Once the d pawn falls, e4 comes next. Rook e1, f6, no rush, just connect them pawns. Indeed, restriction and domination, well said. King g1, here comes h5. I didn't expect him to do so, but he actually takes the time to do it anyways. d3, changes tack after knight h2. Knight h2 is not a fantastic move, but I don't think there's any other move that would help anyways. d3, king g2. And here Andy finds a beautiful move which prompts immediate resignation. So it is black to move, and it's immediately game over. And it's a beautiful little idea.
Not just push the pawn.
You could, but there's even better. find a good move, look for a better one.
D7.
Here,
Oh, one more over. Sorry.
E2.
Yeah.
Rook E2 is pretty good, but you have a move that crushes immediately.
Knight takes E4,
Yes, and if I capture,
then push the pawn.
then D2, exactly. So right on, everyone. Knight takes E4, game over. White resigned immediately, because if rook takes E4, D2, and it kind of pinpoints how disoriented those knights are, and this rook just does not have a way to cover and even stop that pawn from promoting. And knight E4 is what we call a clean move, because it still kept most of black pieces in the right spot. D2, you do close off your rook. Still a winning move. I wouldn't doubt that it's winning. But after knight E4, you actually set up the D2 idea, followed by knight C3 and winning the rook, while also threatening rook F2. And these are unsurmountable threats. There's not much you can do about it. And therefore, white resigned. A glorious game and a comeback for Andy, and all these hard-fought games and not giving up after some setbacks against Ivanchuk gave him the right to play in the Tata Steel A group, that is. So thank you so much for coming. Hope you had a fun time.